Hi there, my name is Jake Shulak. I'm a student here at Columbia College, and today I want to talk about the importance of voting. So first off, why is this country so divided right now? It seems like no matter who we have as candidates, those people are unacceptable to half of the country. But is that really the case? The truth is that only 2/3 of the population votes, and that leaves a huge group of people large enough to change the result of any and all elections. The trick is to help convince those people that their vote really does matter. With voting in particular, the more people you have involved, the better it works. This is the case at any level, and I'll show that through this speech. We need to understand the historical statistics, how your vote can have a huge effect, and what you can do to get involved. Let's look at how this works and why it's essential for everyone to do their part. According to census.org, since 1980, almost every single election has fallen between 62 and 64% voter turnout. 1980, there was 150 million people eligible to vote, only 93 million did, 62%. Now, according to Britannica, that was the year that Reagan won over Carter, and the electoral victory was 489 to 49. Amazing landslide. Even with all that excitement, we still only had 62% of people voting. Now, there's another article by census.org that shows 1996 was the outlier year. Only 59% of people actually came out and voted. So that was 180 who could, 105 actually did, and that was the year that Clinton beat Bob Dole. The popular vote was won by only 8 million votes. 75 million people did not vote. Easily, that election as well could have been overturned. So why are these numbers so consistent? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but there's a few that stand out. According to a Census Bureau survey, 25% of people didn't vote because they didn't like the candidates or the issues. 15.5% didn't because they weren't interested. 14% because they were too busy, and 11% because of illness or disability. That's 66% of people who didn't vote right there between those four categories. 2/3. If we could change any of that, we could overturn any election. We could change the results however we wanted to as citizens. Now, not all this can be fixed with just one solution, but there's a lot that we can do to help all of these in general. According to another report by census.gov, our recent elections have been similar. George Bush in 2000, 60% turnout. Obama in 2008, 64%, and Trump in 2016, 62%. So that's 38% of the population who didn't vote. 86 million people. Now, Clinton lost to Trump by 77,000 votes in 3 states. We've all heard that a million times. But another way to look at that is that's only 0.08% of the people that didn't vote. Or looked at another way, if only one person out of every 1,100 would have changed their mind and voted instead of not, the election could have been changed just by that. So those are broad numbers, but what happens when we look at it more at a local level? So I'll use Minnesota as the example because that's where I'm from. There's an article by Ballotpedia that says Minnesota had 134 state representative elections in 2018. 24 of those elections, or roughly 20% of them, were won by 10% or less of a margin. Now, the average race had about 20,000 votes only in it, and all but one of those races were won by less than 1,000 votes. So we see how these numbers are so small when you really start to break them down, and how every vote really does matter. Now let's look at the statewide level. So Amy Klobuchar, one of our senators, she won her last election in 2018 with 1.5 million votes. The losing candidate had 940,000, so about 500,000 was the margin there. According to the Census Bureau, Minnesota has a population of 5.6 million. So right there, that's 11 times the margin. There was 3 million people that didn't vote, so even that is 6 times the number of people that you would have needed to change that. So now that we've talked about the statistics on those levels, both broad and local, let's talk about why should you vote. Number one, maybe it's a little cheesy, but patriotism. In a democracy, we the people have the power to make these changes. It shouldn't be billionaires or super PACs or any of the political system that just moves without us. It should be we the people who make these decisions. Another thing, people fought and died for these rights. We've gone to war over this. We've warred with ourselves over this. This is something that so many people have fought for. What are we doing if we don't take advantage of what they've done for us? And loving this country should mean that we're willing to make changes to it because we love it. Now, that leads into the next part, which is just civic duty in general. Everybody knows the saying that the only things certain in life are death and taxes. But the way that I think we should think about this is that the only things that are essential to being a US citizen is voting and taxes. Those are the only things that we're asked to do. How can we not do half of our job? So the idea of just voting because we're unhappy means that we're not getting involved in the process early enough. So if you don't like the candidates that are the Democratic nominee or the Republican nominee, get involved in the primaries. That's where you get to actually pick the people who will eventually get that nomination. Now, there's another thought. A lot of people will say, well, my vote doesn't matter. And I'm also in an ethics class, which is just philosophy. And Kant actually talks about this in terms of maxims. So me saying my vote doesn't matter, that might be okay for me to be able to live by, but it can't be a rule that we all live by. Because if everybody decided that their vote didn't matter, no one would vote, and then democracy would just end up collapsing. So that's another good point. Another thing to think about, where are we really if we don't all vote? So you could look at 2016 and you could say, well, the Republicans won by a landslide. But there were so many people that didn't vote. If they would have voted, would Trump have won by a larger margin, or would Hillary have won? We don't really know where the country is if people aren't really voting. And it makes me think of the quote by Gandhi, be the change that you want to see in the world. And the only way that we as citizens have the ability to do that is by voting. So how do you go about voting? Check out ballotopedia.org. That'll show you the candidates in the upcoming elections. NASS.org will show you polling places. OpenSecrets.org will show you the finances of the candidates. And Ballotopedia will show you their stances. So let's try and bring this all together. We've talked a lot about how the trends related to voting are going and how staggeringly low the numbers of turnout are. The solution to this problem is very simple, although it's not always the easiest thing to do. We need to all vote. We should all take every opportunity to have our voices heard, because that's why the founders gave us that ability. If you don't like the politicians, get involved earlier in the process. Go, get involved in the primaries. If you don't like their policies, then make your voice be heard with your ballot. If you don't like the direction that we're heading in as a country, then turn yourself around and head to the polling places in November. And if you want to see our democracy become even stronger and better in the next 200 years, then I'll see you at the polls. Thank you.